Hello. I'm going to talk a little bit about 8-shaft weaving and perhaps why some people end up with what we call shaft envy after they're weaving on perhaps a 2-shaft loom or a 4-shaft loom. And they start asking, can I weave that on my 4-shaft loom or on my rigid heddle loom? In some cases you can, but the process is a lot different, a lot slower, and you find out that maybe you really would like to have more shafts. If not, not a problem. If you haven't already watched it, I have another video explaining how you can weave cats that I'm going to show you on the 8-shaft on a rigid heddle loom. Well, I should say weaving one cat. I'm going to now start weaving cats upside down because I'm doing the other end of a table runner that I'm weaving. And we're going to talk a little bit about what the shafts do. Again, this is a very brief explanation, and there's a lot more to it and a lot more things you can do with 8 shafts, 16 shafts, 24 shafts. Oh yes, there are a lot more shafts out there that you can add to a loom and do a lot more weaving, many intricate patterns. So here we are at my loom, and in this situation I am going to talk a little bit about overshot and how I weave the kitty cats and how you can too, and compare a rigid heddle loom to something that has more shafts, and sometimes we call it shaft envy. A lot of times people start with maybe a rigid heddle. A rigid heddle has some limitations, but you can do a lot with them. It takes a lot of manipulating, and I show that in another video on how to weave cats on a rigid heddle loom. For example, this one is a 12 dent. We have a slot, hole, and if we do an inch, if we put a ruler here, there are 12 combination of slot holes in 1 inch, which means this is 12 ends per inch. In this situation, I'm using on this loom, I'm using 20 ends per inch. And it happens to be a 10 dent reed, but I put 2 in every one. If I would try to take one of these very thin yarn and put one in every slot, it would spread them out and you would not have the density that you have here. So using this particular reed with the same thickness of yarn might not work out the way that you're expecting. So that's one thing that I do notice that happens with other people when you're learning to weave. I know I made that same mistake. I actually did the opposite. I did thick and I should have done a lot thinner. It was too dense to begin with, but you know, we live and learn. Anyway, that's one thing to compare. If I wanted to use my 8-shaft loom, similar, and if you hear noise in the background, that's Maggie. She wants me to play. If you want to use your rigid heddle as a 2-shaft, you only have to thread these 2, and you could go 1, 1, 1, 1, back and forth, or 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. But we know that this particular loom has heddles, and the heddles have a hole in the middle. So what you'd be doing, you'd be threading every single, here we go. You'd be threading the hole in the 1 and the hole in 2 and going back and forth, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. But after a while, some of us say, you know, I want to weave something else. I already wove the other end of this, so what I'm going to be doing literally is I'm going to be weaving cats upside down. So I'm going to be starting with the ears and weaving the other direction, just to let you know what I'm doing. So we'll be starting from the head going down to the tail. But I'm going to turn it around. This loom is threaded in a V, going 8. So if I would go up here all the way down and back and forth, and each one of these V's makes a cat. Of course, there's more to it than that. It has to do with a tie-up and everything. So for example, this is 1, 2, and it's on treadle 1. So if I would press that one, the 2 in the back go up. And how you arrange everything and how you put them in order, that's how you create different patterns, different cats, fish, all the different things that I enjoy creating. I'm going to now show you how I weave kitty cats upside down using the 2 shuttles. We have the heavier one. This happens to be 3-2, and this is 10-2. Now the warp is 8-2, but I really want the cat to show up more, so I go down even to a thinner thread. The whole towel or table runner is all 8-2. So 8-2 here, 8-2 for this charcoal color. However, when I get to the pattern, I always like to go with something smaller. If you don't have 3-2 yarn, you can also use 2 5-2s together, or whatever you need to get a heavier yarn so you get to see what you're creating. It comes out a little bit better. It might not look great right now, but once it's washed and dried, it really looks very nice. All right, I'm going to tension this a little bit more, or move it up so we have room. And I also have what I call my little cheat sheet here. It says cat on it. I have all different Post-its for different different patterns that I'm doing. So if I want to do a different one, I just have to crawl under my loom and basically retie all the treadles so I can do something else. Now in this situation, it tells me I'm going to start with number 9, which means right now I'm lifting a lot of harnesses, and that's for the very tip of the ear. Now the pattern I showed you is a little different than the one that I'm doing because I was investigating something else. So for the very first one, I do it very light. And now again, remember, we're doing cats upside down, and I'm doing what we call the pattern, and then the tabby, which means right now I'm doing all the odd threads, 1, 3, 5, and 7. And then when I'm going to do the head now, when I go the other direction, it is all, well, I think I do that the other way around. Yeah, 2, 4, 6, 8. So here we go. I'm going to do the head, which is nice. And again, if I hadn't put that lock thread in there, all of these that I'm going back and forth would just come out. And you see on the other side. I'm going to speed up a little bit. So according to my pattern, I'm doing 3, 4 times for the head. Now I'm going to go and reduce it because I'm going to do the neck. Most of the time people use floating selvages, and you might notice, oh, she doesn't have floating selvages. Correct, I don't. If I find that I might need one, or I should have put one in, I might then just go to the edge here and catch that edge thread to make everything work so it doesn't pull out. Now I'm on to the body, and according to my directions that I have here, I do this for the body. One more for the body. And now I'm going to start doing the bottom part to get to where the tails are going to go. And what's happening is each time I'm covering up another set of threads. Okay, we did an extra body one there. I'm just going to leave that in there. Oh, no, we didn't. We need to go down to the next one here. And now I am going to do the tail. According to my pattern, I have 6 tail. On 4. And what's happening right now for the tail, there are 3 down. And we'll go back and forth. Now in this case, as you can tell, I ran out of thread. So what I would do one more the same direction. And again, what happens is I have things tied up. So for this situation, for the tail of the cat, 3 go down. And when I show on a rigid heddle loom, basically you have to literally push those threads down. And just imagine if you had a whole lot of cats across on a rigid heddle, you would have to use your pickup stick. You couldn't do it with this. You would have to basically push down. So I'd have to start with this one, push those 3 down. Then I'd have to come over here and push those 3 down. And you'd have to count all the way across. That's one reason why a lot of times people find out that they start to want to weave more complicated patterns and they decide they need more shafts. So if you start off with 2, maybe you're going to add 4, with 4, and then you go on to 8. That is my short demonstration on how you can weave kitty cats on 8 shafts. So now maybe you do have shaft envy. So maybe you were wondering in the last video, she ran out of thread and she has one more to do. Now what's she going to do? Well, I did have to stop and pause and wind a little bit more in a bobbin. I didn't have a bobbin ready. Normally I have a bobbin already to go. So what am I going to do? Well, I know I have to do one more shot of just the last part of the tail. So I'm going to press that down. Then I'm going to take the little bit of leftover and wind it, or just kind of tuck it in the same open shed that we have here. And then I'm going to take this one, put it through, and I literally am going to allow it probably to stick out a little bit, and I'll trim it later. And I'm going to beat it, and I am going to go back and forth now. Now I'm ready to do my tabby. So what I'll do is go back and forth. That's 1, that was 2, 3, 4. And what I'm doing at the other end, I'm wrapping that around. 4, 5, and it was 6. And the last thing I need to do is the border. So I will go across with the border, and then I will cut that off. And again, tuck that right back in the same shed. And I pull most of these through the other end. And then sometimes I trim them close when I'm ready to, before I wash. And sometimes I do it after I wash the fabric. And in this case, again, if you want to see what I do next, I cut that one off. I'm going to put that in the same shed since it's so thin. And then you're not going to really see it. It's not going to show up once it's washed. I'll let that go in a little bit. Now I'm ready to do the rest of the border. And I do about 4 or 5 inches to the end. And again, we have our upside down kitty cats. And you get to see how I added a thread.